This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Dads. Have you ever noticed how dads are basically universally the same? It's as though the moment they had a child, they were sent to dad camp. They were given a DIY manual, a book of shitty dad jokes.
What's with the big paws? The bartender asked. I am a bear!
A pair of New Balances, and they were sent on their way. Today we're going to explore the origins, the evolution, and the commercialization of what we know today as dad culture.
Going over how to style dad shoes now.
We're talking dad hats.
West, I was brought up very sternly and strictly.
What's orange and sounds like a parrot? Carrot.
If we take a quick look at the animal kingdom, you're not going to see a whole lot of dads. Only about 5% of mammals actually show a mum and a dad raising a child. But then we had humans. Us enlightened apes, after millions and millions of years of evolution, one day took a look at our poor wives and saw the sadness in her eyes as she sacrificed her entire life to raise our children. We paused and said, "Oi, babe, I can help out a little bit." Obviously, I'm not going to change the nappy. Behave yourself, love. It wouldn't be until about the 1800s, with the spread of Christianity around the world through colonialism, that monogamy would become a socially and legally enforced norm around the world. Pretty much, for most of history, all the high-value men, the top shaggers, they engaged in polygamy. And he would kind of have the pick of the litter, and then everyone else would pick up the scraps. Not calling women scraps, but you know, that's just how it was in those days. And so all of this leads us to the classic dad.
Oh boy, here we go.
Of course, dads come in many shapes and sizes.
Alfie, do you think you're going to be a good dad? Yeah.
But when we're talking about dad culture, we all know what we're talking about. It's a very specific type of dad, and that is the boomer / Gen X dad. Officially speaking, a boomer is someone who was born between 1946 and 1964. Gen X being 1965 and 1980. And I don't know what it was about that era, but the names of much of these classic dads were very simple. Usually just a one-syllable name that you can blurt out when you're drunk. Steve, Mick, Dave, Jeff. When it comes to employment, either he listened to his parents and got an education, he found a job early and invested his life into a company, optimistic that he'll make something of himself, and then he just got stuck in it and he works in like middle management and hates his job.
What do you do? I'm a negative asset manager.
On the other hand, you have the, let's just say, uneducated lot. These were the ones that went more down the day laboring route. Jobs like electrician, carpet fitter, carpenter, builder, just, you know, generally something with your hands, and typically they were self-employed. And besides completely fucking their backs and their knees, it worked out pretty well for them. They made a good living, and both of these lot made enough money to buy a house. But more important than all of that, you have fashion. Dad fashion is really something to be revered. Let's start up top with the haircut. I mean, there's really two options. You either accept that you're balding and you shave it all off, or you fight. Desperately clawing on to the last few strands of hair on your head, you'll probably adopt the halo haircut, where the hair lingers around the side and the top is left bald so that it can catch the sun and burn. When it comes to t-shirts, it's mainly like a polo shirt. Maybe if he's slightly more stylish, like a plaid button-up t-shirt. But more often, it's a very tight white t-shirt that, to emphasize the beer belly, is tucked neatly into the trousers. Those trousers being a pair of blue jeans, or like a beige pair of cargo shorts with many pockets to keep many things in. When we get down to the feet, of course, the classic New Balance or any chunky white shoe. But let's not forget about accessories, typically a high-end pair of mountaineering glasses designed to climb up Everest that they'll proudly crack out at the family barbecue. And as well, of course, there is the bum bag. In that, they'll have their keys, their wallet, some loose change so you can hear them a mile away when they're walking, and then their shitty Android that they'll always have the volume on max, and it will have one of those leather dad cases so they can slap it shut when they're finished. Oh, and I nearly forgot, to stop his bald spot from burning, he'll of course wear a dad hat. So that's pretty much it for fashion. Obviously, you also have the holiday dad mode, which is basically just the normal dad with like the saturation turned up, Hawaiian shirts, flip-flops with socks, and a bucket hat. When it comes to fashion, comfort is key. Style is secondary. Probably third dairy as well. But you see, there is much more depth to the classic dad than just his appearance.
Sometimes I say, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. But really, I am mad, and I'm disappointed.
The baby boomer and Gen X dads were very, very unique. They were revolutionary in many ways. You can describe this dad as being sort of fun, happy-go-lucky, optimistic, and that is the opposite of their fathers.
Dad, last week
Jesus Christ, Francis, what the hell is wrong with you?
The dads of the silent generation and the greatest generation, their attitude towards parenting was totally different. Around the sort of 1920s, they would actually warn against excessive displays of affection from parents towards their children. It was kind of two things really. One was that it would maintain sort of cleanliness, you know, harder to pass diseases on. But then secondly, there was also this attitude that if you are too friendly and too close to your child, they will grow up to be very fussy and very spoiled. And so they would literally recommend things like, if you're gonna dare to show affection to your child, definitely don't hug them too much, just give them a good handshake. And like, you have to have some empathy for this generation. They came out of some very dark times, but it would be after World War II when everything would change.
This man's book is only outsold in the history of books by one other. The top-selling book in the world is the Bible. The second bestseller belongs to Dr. Spock.
I was brought up very sternly and strictly by a New England couple, especially my fiercely moralistic mother. I cared a lot about children, but I think I also thought there must be easier ways, more pleasant ways to bring up children than the rather severe, oppressive way that my mother used.
There was actually one book in particular that changed parenting massively, called The Common Sense Book of Baby and Child Care by Dr. Benjamin Spock, not related to the Star Trek person. And basically it argued that you can be nice to your kids. You don't have to rule with an iron fist and slap them if they smile at you. It's actually quite important to have some emotional connection to your child.
I just wanted to call and say I love you.
Oh, well, that's awesome, buddy. I love you too. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, I love you more.
Make me cry.
And so they kind of moved away from this very strict, authoritative way of raising children and became the more cool, open, fun, and friendly dad. Before we go any further with this video, I want to give a massive shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring. Having a nice website these days is so important. It's your shop front. If your windows are broken and it's dusty out front, no one's coming in. So you need your website to look good and be professional. Lucky for you, Squarespace exists. With tons of templates to choose from, you can pick and customize any of them to fit exactly what it is you do. Maybe you're starting up a little clothing brand. Maybe you're selling a fitness course. Squarespace will really make you stand out from the crowd. As well, they have tons of built-in tools like appointment scheduling, email marketing, e-commerce. I've personally used Squarespace for my project Viral Beast, where we make thumbnails for different creators. I'm really proud of what we've created and I have to thank Squarespace for that. So be sure to check out squarespace.com/JimmyTheGiant and to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain, use the code JimmyTheGiant. Anyway, back to the video.
Hey son, I'm gonna whip up some pancakes on the griddle, or I like to call it the gritty. Right, look, blueberries or chocolate chip.
So when it comes to their behavior, you can look at a few things. If we start with mannerisms, your classic dad has perfected the handshake.
Always make this connection first, then wrap your fingers around for a nice firm handshake.
He'll grip your hand so hard that your fingers will change color. He'll have a hearty belly laugh. And if he hears a joke that is just so good, you might see him slapping his knee with joy. And obviously, one of the most important elements of dad mannerisms is once he's had a few Stellas at the family barbecue and he decides to bust out a couple of dad dances. Oof. You see now? Back in my day. Behave yourself now. Pretty much he's a quintessential family man. He loves spending time with the kids and his wife. Planning days out that inevitably go awry. They break down on the motorway. They're 4 hours late. The kids are crying and screaming, Dad, why are you taking us to fucking Gulliver's Land? This place sucks.
Welcome to Disneyland.
Music is pretty simple. It's got a name. It's called Dad Rock, which is basically like the Beatles, Rolling Stone, Pink Floyd, you know, just rock music. And of course, he loves football and his local team. I've been playing shit this season, but you know, it's looking up for next. In fact, he was actually once going to be a professional footballer until he snapped his ACL and now he just coaches his son's team.
That's a yellow card, ref! Card him! Yellow card him, ref!
And so throughout the 80s, the 90s, and now, this sort of classic dad stereotype is proliferated through the media. You see stuff like Bryan Cranston playing Hal in Malcolm in the Middle, Tim Allen as Tim Taylor in Home Improvements, Steve Martin in Everything. And I think these films and television shows probably proliferated the idea of dad culture, and what we see as dads now, a lot of it comes from these roles. Now, I've talked a lot about the sort of behaviors and traits of the classic dad, but I really want to touch on the role and responsibility of the dad. A lot of the time, the classic dad sees himself as being responsible, helpful, and like a bit of a workhorse. The sort of tough, manly things fall on his shoulders. Obviously, things like DIY. The dad is truly in his element if he has a toolkit near him.
Oh, watch the door frame! Watch the door frame!
And often he'll overestimate his abilities in DIY. He'll try to do jobs he's probably not that expert in, and occasionally he fucks it up a little bit. On top of that, things like barbecuing. It's like a manly dad thing when it comes to cooking meat on fire. And of course, finally, you've got looking after the lawn, like doing the grass, cutting the edges. And I think all of this falls down to this idea of dads being useful.
That's one fine-looking barbecue pit. Why doesn't mine look like that?
Despite the very common bumbling dad stereotype you see with characters like Homer Simpson, who no doubt exist, I do think it is far more common that the classic dad loves to just be helpful. Mainly if it's something physical or task-driven. Or maybe you need help dealing with your finances or some problem you're in. The classic dad is always there for you to help you out.
Just as I'm working on my video, Dad's come around to do the DIY.
I'm just going to have my hair cut, yes.
No, I'll get you in hair and makeup.
And I think it's really interesting because to me, this is the dad's way of showing love. I think their upbringing really affected them when it came to emotional connection. Their dads never really showed them much emotionality, and so they might struggle to say words like, I love you, son. But their way of showing it is by just being loyal and helpful.
He's right in here.
Hey! You know what they call a sleepy police officer?
What's that, big guy? Huh? Turn around.
An undercover cop.
But you see, there is one very core part of dad culture that we're yet to touch on, and that is the dad joke.
Andy has 150 candy bars. He eats 125. What does Andy have now?
Diabetes. Seriously?
The term dad joke was first used in 1987. It was in an article called Don't Ban the Dad Jokes, Preserve Them and Revere Them. So what the dad joke is effectively a bad joke. Usually some kind of pun that you hear and you roll your eyes and you go, fuck's sake, dad. And what's really interesting is that these dad jokes spread around dad culture without, I'm guessing, a formal meeting. And you might be wondering, why? Why do they all love this type of lame humor? I think what it really comes down to was that dads in this generation, they wanted to be more close and more friendly to their children. And so they needed a way to be fun and say funny things and joke. But their humor that they used down the pub with the boys probably was not going to fly in front of the kids and your wife.
Yeah, bloke with cleft palate and one with a water on the brain. So the one with a cleft palate goes, alright, come on.
And so they went on a quest to find family-friendly humor. There was lots of family-friendly humor back in this era when it was really taboo to say rude and inappropriate things, especially swearing.
The Supreme Court ruled no more praying in school. From now on, the kids have to study to get good marks.
And so this unique brand of dad jokes. Oh, Dad, I'm hungry. Oh, hi, hungry. I'm Dad. Fuck off, Dad. Leading to the core principle, the backbone of dad culture, and that is being uncool.
I worry I'm not going to be a cool dad. Are you a cool dad?
No. No, I love him. I love him more than anything on the planet, but no, I stink too. I stink.
The truth is that amongst many kids, they see their dads as uncool. Their mums, not so much. Their mums still might dress well. They might watch some modern entertainment, but Dad hasn't changed in 40 years.
And my girl here will have the Kraft macaroni and
And so I was looking around, and one of the things I saw was a Reddit post. Yeah, I know, high quality research. But this Reddit post made a good point, and that was that dads aren't uncool, they were just cool in a different era. And I do think there is an element of truth here. Young men, we want to be cool. We want to be cool until we find a woman who loves us, and then we have kids with them.
Is this room 106?
Hey, who's that?
Simpson. After all I've put up with for all these years.
And I think on top of this, dads actually like being uncool. It's part of their humor. It's like a self-deprecation. But then in the 2010s, something weird would happen. And that is the rise of Dadcore.
But at the Spanish luxury brand's most recent annual show, the dad look dominated.
And so we would see things like Balenciaga in 2017, making these shoes that were like oversized and bulky, very reminiscent of dad shoes. And so slowly this style of dressing like your dad became popular.
So you can wear these on the runway and for raking leaves.
I collect New Balance sneakers. I have over 600 pairs.
Brands like Adidas, Nike, and particularly New Balance saw a massive rise in success in their kind of old, clunky looking models. And so from the late 2010s to now, really, Dadcore has become a key part of fashion. And it's fashion that's built around the idea of comfortability and relaxed looks. And so with that leads us on to the next generation of dads.
No, guys, we're not stopping at McDonald's. Too many GMOs.
Yeah, Dad's listening. Let's have a convo. Let's have a little dish sesh right now.
The millennials that everyone joked about are now dads. Not all of them. In fact, very few. They're having far less children and having them far later. But like each generation of dads, this generation have new ideas.
We all want our kids to be safe and happy, but by being overprotective, are we raising a generation of fearful, self-doubting snowflakes? Well,
there is definitely a less authoritative and more democratic way of dealing with children. There's a bigger emphasis on emotional connection and respecting children. In fact, dads spend much more time now with their children than those of baby boomers and Gen X. And there's a much better understanding these days around how childhood shapes an adult when they grow up. And so now conversations around emotions and feelings are much more common. Yes, we are all pussies now.
Just wanted to let you know that dinner is ready, if you consent to it, of course. I don't.
I'm joking. I actually don't think this generation are all gonna be soppy bollocks. I'm actually very optimistic around this generation of dads.
The parents of the 1950s were, I think, the most unusual generation of the 20th century.
For a whole generation that I suppose we would now call spoiled kids.
I think we gave them much too much.
Historically, every generation is worried that the generation below them is going to be too soft, too sensitive, and raise terrible children. The greatest generation said it about the baby boomers say it about millennials, and probably millennials will say it about Gen Z. They have literally always said this. And so lots of people do worry about our generation, the snowflake generation, that we're going to not raise our children very well. But I think we're going to find a good middle ground. I think men being okay with emotions is different than men being overly emotional. I think there's a difference between crying because you stubbed your toe and being okay with explaining to your son that you love them no matter what, listening to their thoughts and feelings and treating them with respect. And we can actually see, if we look at divorce rates now, millennials have far lower divorce rates than that of previous generations. This means that parents will stay together for longer, and there's lots of studies about how parents staying together throughout a childhood's life is very important. And I think there is a better understanding around quality relationships, boundaries, wants, needs, all this kind of stuff. And so the usual shtick that this generation all needs safe spaces and we all drink soy lattes, I think the worst of that stereotype are probably not going to have kids, and that the men that want to be dads are going to have some traditional elements, but are also going to be more open and accepting. I think what will happen is a lot of the things we liked about our parents' generation, we will take and we'll use those things. And some of the things we didn't will change and will evolve. I think dad jokes aren't going anywhere. Probably, maybe slightly shitter at DIY, but we'll still do it because we don't want to be emasculated by ticking the box that makes someone else come and do your furniture. Probably our skills will be trying to turn off the motion blur setting on your television. We're going to be good with technology.
Everything just by touching.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I think so.
I'd say that's a real advancement.
Dads these days probably listen to lots of podcasts and self-help, so probably they learn a lot more and they're probably going to try different things. I reckon there's going to be a lot more young dads who are into like outdoor sports, so mountain biking, rock climbing. Probably instead of getting excited about our son playing football, we'll be celebrating our son dropping in on a half pipe for the first time. And I think we're going to be slightly more in touch with youth culture because we understand technology a lot more. It's easier to follow, but probably we'll reminisce about the good old days of Eminem and 50 Cent and how these mumble rappers these days just aren't real rap. And of course, unlike my dad not being able to play Crash Bandicoot, my proudest moment will be when he lands his first 360 no-scope on me. And so I don't really buy into the whole negativity of our generation being dads. I think we're gonna do just fine. I'll be really interested in hearing stories about your dad and how you plan to parent differently or the same as your parents. So drop a comment below. If you enjoyed this topic, join us on the Afters podcast where we talk about this and much more. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Peace.